Mark Manson, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today. I really do appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you for having me.
So first off, one of the things that I wanted to get at, the question I want to ask right out of the gate was Tim Ferriss posted, I think this past week, a piece on the self-help trap, like the optimization piece. I'm sure you probably had a chance to read it. And it reminded me about the profile piece that you had a number of years ago. I think when I can't remember which magazine it was in. I want to get your thoughts on that because it's not like Tim is the only one that's been circling this. There's several of people in this space that have been circling it. Would you care to kind of lean into this a little bit and share maybe what your thoughts are around where we're at in this particular era right now?
Sure. I was very happy to see it because I think one of my I don't want to say qualm because I am a Tim Ferriss fan and I love a lot of the stuff that he's done over the years. But um, one of the things that I've written about in my work for almost 15 years now is that sometimes the telling yourself that you need to improve is a larger problem than the thing you're trying to improve. And so there's always this maximally efficient point at which sometimes I jokingly say optimal is suboptimal because if you try to optimize everything, you actually end up stressing yourself and dragging yourself so crazy that you make yourself feel even worse about yourself. And so, actually, kind of the optimal level of self improvement is not to improve everything all the time. It is to actually let things be imperfect and wrong sometimes.
Right. I think to that end, it reduces the actual human part of living if you're constantly trying to optimize. Like it defeats that, right? You're processing a life rather than living one.
Yes, and there's so in the first chapter of the subtle art of not giving a fuck, I wrote about this a little bit in that in a concept that I call the backwards law, right? Which is that if you are uh if you are constantly telling yourself that you need to improve something, there is a subtle implication there that you are also telling yourself that I am not good enough as I am now. And I think when it comes to any sort of self improvement or personal growth, there's this constant tension between self acceptance and the desire to change and improve. And I think if you have too much obsession over change without an acceptance of who you are, you can drive yourself crazy. But also, if you have too much acceptance of who you are without a desire to change and improve, um, then you become complacent and lethargic and nothing happens.
Yeah, it's nuanced for sure. What are your thoughts on stoicism in that regard? Because that's really taken a rise over. Because again, Tim started talking about it before Ryan jumped into it, and now we're seeing where I almost wonder if again you hear this idea of this is what a stoic would do, as opposed to I'm going to be stoic about this. Like we're almost seeing like a prescriptive thing rather than just a return to things. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
I'm a fan of stoicism in general. It's not what how I particularly identify myself, but I think there's a lot of usefulness. I think the reason we've seen such a resurgence in stoicism over the last 10 years is because stoicism is very much based around understanding what you can control and what is outside of your control, and taking responsibility and ownership for what's inside of your control, and also being at peace with what's outside of your control. And I think in this day and age where we are constantly bombarded with 8 million things in the world that are outside of our control, um, it's it's a very I think as a message it has found like a new resonance and importance for everyday people.
It we seem to go back to the things that worked eras ago, like eons ago. Like Thoreau, the new doc. Have you seen the Ken Burns documentary that just got released the past couple of days about Henry David Thoreau? It was dropped on
No.
PBS. Yeah, it was dropped on. It's 3 hours. I started to watch it about 30 minutes in. I'm like, I need to be immersed in this, so I do not have the mental bandwidth to watch it right now. But that was one of the things that came up with some of the literary scholars were saying, hey, the reason like Thoreau is like that mentality is something we're returning to right now. We're seeing a lot of this
Mhm.
return to things that, I mean, Cal Newport wrote about that 100-year-old book that Arnold Bennett wrote, How to Live on 24 Hours a Day. It's this older stuff we keep coming back to. First off, why do you see that resurgence happening, not just with Stoicism, but with other things? And also, why do you see a resistance to it too? Because just as much as there's an adoption, there's almost like this pushback on these kind of things as well.
Well, I think there's something a little bit seductive about getting swept up in all of the noise and the drama and all of the crazy things that are going on around you. There's a sense of meaning and purpose and importance that comes with it. Um, and I think it's hard to resist. And the way the human mind works is that it rationalizes what it already feels or what it already wants, not the other way around. In terms of like timeless wisdom, I just think it's funny. Like one of the criticisms I often get in my work is that like people say like, well, you didn't come up with any of this stuff. You're just kind of regurgitating, the Greeks or the Enlightenment philosophers or the existentialists. And I kind of feel like that is the whole point. I just think most of this advice, like Thoreau, this whole idea of like leaving society and isolating yourself to like really discover who you are and understand like what you actually care about and what you want for your life. I mean, there's examples of that going back into the ancient world. Like none of these ideas are really any new. There's no innovation happening in this space. The thing is that it needs to be repeated constantly
Yeah.
because we are always being our attention is always being hijacked and manipulated back into stuff that we don't want to be dealing with. And so we need this refrain, we need this like constant reminder of all of these things.
Well, and you brought up the idea of attention. And years ago on your YouTube channel, one of your first videos was about the attention diet, like taking an attention diet. So that leads me to, as somebody who writes about productivity and time management, and I've over the years, in my 15 years of doing this, have decided ultimately productivity is kind of broken, right? Like it's the activity of it as opposed to like I prefer to lean back into again something that was more timeless, something that we kind of relied on before, this idea of productiveness, the state of being productive as opposed to the activity of producing. What are your thoughts on productivity?
Oh man.
And we only have about
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna say, how many hours are we doing this? Oh man.
because it is kind of crazy. Because I mean, I think the interesting thing about productivity is, especially with AI, right? Like there was that report that
Yeah,
came out recently that said the study that said, hey, AI was supposed to help us not work as much, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but guess what? That's not what's
yeah,
happened. And I mean, there is this, I guess, connective tissue to capitalism that I think productivity is definitely kind of
for
tethered
sure.
itself to. But yeah, I mean, I think that I think this idea of checking off as many boxes as possible and all these things have like the pursuit of inbox zero, for example, when Merlin Mann, who coined the term, clearly didn't mean let's just get our email to zero every day. Like,
Right.
again, it's so again, I'd love to like lean into this a little bit to see where you land on this.
So I think there's two aspects to productivity, and I think one gets overemphasized much more than the other. The first aspect, I think, is probably what most people think on the surface level, like when they think of productivity, which is simply like how many hours are you putting in of of work? How much work are you getting done per day? How much work are you getting done per hour, and so on. I think the second aspect of it is leverage. Because you can work 60 hours a week on stuff that doesn't matter, that doesn't scale, that doesn't move the needle, that doesn't change anything. You can also work 1 hour a day on things that are extremely high leverage and produce more output than somebody working 10 hours a day. And so I think the most of the productivity advice out there, all the productivity hacks and the systems and tools and everything, most of it is around either working for longer extended period of time, or it's like little tools and hacks for you to maybe get 12 hours worth of work done in 9 instead of
Mm.
12. And very little of that is actually looking at like how impactful and high leverage is the work that you're doing in the first place. Um, it's funny. I was just talking to a friend like a week or two ago, and he was saying he had like 20,000 unread emails in his inbox, and I kind of laughed and I was like, well, you're clearly never going to experience inbox zero in your entire life, and he kind of laughed and he was like, "Yeah, I think inbox zero is completely overrated." He's like, "I would spend more time like getting myself to inbox zero than to just like not read the emails that I don't need to read. Like I don't why should I waste the time organizing my inbox when I can just scan through, find the 8 or 10 that I need to read and respond to and then just deal with those." So it is I do think, and to your point, it's it's interesting that if you look at the rate of productivity growth over time, you know, you would think that computers and the internet and smartphones and everything, you would see this explosion in productivity in terms of like output per hour. Um, but when you look at the economic data, you don't see that at all. You see people today are just as productive as they were before we had all this technology. And so I think it's we're any efficiencies we're gaining, we're filling up that extra time with meaningless junk.
We're chasing the wrong stuff, right? Like, I mean, in your book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Like, I mean, it's quality is the core, right? I mean, you could, I mean, you have a video where I think it was a recent one where you talked about like when you, I think I saw the comments where it's like, where it was like, Mark's trying to shoot for the Wolf of Wall Street record for the amount of times that the F-bomb is dropped or whatever. But it's the idea of there's so many that you're chasing, then none of them are of any value, right? Like, I mean, the
Yeah.
quality of output. And so this leads me to one of my questions I had here. We're going to get to Tim's question here in a second, but in the chat. But you clearly do give a fuck about at least one thing. So I'm going to ask you, what is the thing that you give a fuck about mostly?
The thing I give the most fucks about, I think, is living a meaningful and fulfilling life. That's not the same thing as a happy life or a pleasant life.
Right.
It is living a life that is feels meaningful. That after the fact, I look back and I have as few regrets as possible.
Right. And this leads to a sidebar, which is, I mean, this pursuit of happiness again. I was listening to Adam Grant talk to Daniel Kahneman years ago, and he talked, and I think Adam asked, "Do you want to put more happiness into the world?" And Kahneman said, "No, I want to have less misery in the world, because I think
Mhm.
you can't have happiness if you're happy all the time. The quality of it is lower. So for me, I'm seeking contentment, which sounds like a lot of like contentment is like, okay, there's the mean, and then yes, I'll have spikes of happiness, but clearly I'll have spikes of sadness, right?"
Yeah. Yeah, and misery is coming back to the concept of leverage. Like, I think that's just a higher leverage thing to solve than trying to make people like taking people from a 7 to a 10 is much less meaningful than taking somebody from like a 2 to a 7.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Tim's got a question here. So this goes back to our talk about, the idea of the different, methods and frames and systems. Like he questions, improve or develop. It might be sensible to not always try to optimize, but what about trying to always develop?
I like develop. I do think develop is an improvement over the word optimize. I would say, and at risk of sounding a little bit, cheesy and woo woo, but I like the concept of evolving.
Hmm.
Like if you think about like what evolution is that there's like a certain amount of experimentation and then iteration over time, and so I think all of us continue to evolve throughout our lives, and that allows for the space for an answer that felt correct, say in our 20s, to no longer feel correct in our 40s, which is and that answer is no longer correct in our 60s. So it is there's like an evolution of identity that happens over time, and different behaviors and practices make more sense sometimes than others.
this is a beautiful dovetail into the idea of language, because I just finished for the first time, and a lot of people were blown away by this, considering I again look at time. I finally watched Arrival, the Denis Villeneuve movie.
Oh, yes.
I finally watched on a plane home, and my wife had even said, she's like, I can't believe you haven't watched this yet. Like, it's literally about the language of time, and I'm like, no spoilers. Although it's like a 10-year-old movie, everybody. So if you haven't watched it yet, then I think I'm past.
It's a great movie.
It's a great movie. And then even in the documentary that I was just mentioning, the Thoreau documentary, talking about writing and the language, how, and again, improve, develop, like evolve, like language is a really important thing to you, it seems, as a writer. Like how much do you spend time just looking at language, so that, because a lot of people will say to writers and to those that are in these kind of spaces, oh, it's semantics. It's just semantics. You're replacing this word with this, which to me can feel like a cop-out, but it's also, I mean, from their vantage point, sure. What are your thoughts around like the importance of language when it comes to you, and also when you're trying to convey your message?
It's everything. It's, again, like, none of these ideas are new. Let me ask you this: like, how many times in your life have people told you something, and like the first 10 times people say it to you, you're like, I'm fine. Like, no, I don't need that. And then the 11th time, it's like something's different. It's the way they say it. Maybe it's the moment. Maybe it's like the vehicle of which it arrives.
The
And it hits
person,
you like a ton of.
the person. It could be the moment that you're in. You talk about the stages of life in one of your video. Like in phase 1, it's not necessarily going to matter, but in stage 3, it certainly does.
Yeah. And so what you find frequently is that it's not the idea that's being rejected, it's the packaging. And you see this in my industry all the time. Like,
Yeah.
you can take the same idea and repackage it 3 or 4 times, and then as soon as you put some F bombs around it or something, it lands for millions of people. And
Uh-huh.
so it's, I see so much of this is in the efficiency of communication, and in kind of the linguistic aspect around it, because these are, so many of these things are self-evident. Like, there are things that we already kind of know deep down, but we just need somebody to put words around them or express them in a certain way. And then when we hear it, we're like, oh God, yeah, that's right. That's it.
Yeah, it's also taste, right? Like it's taste as well. Like, I mean, you're not
Hmm.
everybody's cup of tea, right? Because of the F
Totally.
bombs, right? And you know that, and it's not like you try to change to make that work. You're like, okay, well, I'm going to lean into that. So, I mean, I know that I've said things that, again, are packaged differently than, say, what Cal would say or what David Allen would say or anything like that, and it resonates, right? So resonance really, really matters with the follow up book to
Hmm.
Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. Everything is fucked, right? I think it was the title, which is about hope, right? And the idea of that book, it's almost like the paradox, right, of that title versus what it's really about. How did that book land comparatively to the Subtle Art? Because the Subtle Art, everybody, like, you're known for that
Yeah.
book, but this one, I always like, it's like David Allen's Getting Things Done, and I always ask him, like, what about making it all work? Like the follow up to that, right? I mean,
Right.
I'm waiting for James to release a follow up to Atomic Habits to go, okay, well, what about this one? So what about the follow up? Like, how did that process go for you? I mean, where does it sit for you at this point?
Um, it's a very mixed thing, and it because when you have such a smash hit like that, like, you kind of feel in a no-win situation.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, no matter what I do, I know this is going to perform worse. Uh, and so you kind of sit there and you're like, do I fight against that, or do I just embrace it and then write the thing that I want to write? I ended up kind of st- going with the latter. I was like, you know what? Uh, Nothing's going to live up to how popular the first book was. So why don't I just really try to do something different here, or go in a little bit of a different direction? So I went much more philosophical in the second book. I really dug into a lot more of the psychological research and like historical philosophy texts. And I got like more creative and kind of literary with it. It wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but it produced a book that it's like, it's weird because on the one hand, I in some ways, I'm more proud of it because it was a harder book to write, and I think it is deeper intellectually, and it has more novel ideas in it. On the other hand, it's harder to read, and it wasn't nearly as popular, and people rarely ask me about it. So it's it's always like it's always this weird mixed feeling inside of you.
It's like the Rick Rubin thing, right? The audience comes last. Like that book, you probably like. I mean, the book I've just finished writing is the one that I mean. I don't know how it's going to work, but I know that it's the book that I'm like, this is the one that I really want to write. And like, the rest be damned, right? Like that's kind of the way you have to. I want to ask you a couple more questions about what you're doing on YouTube these days because you're spending. I mean, there's a lot more going on there. The Solved series that you're doing. How many things have you actually solved? Again, language matters, right? Like, I mean, for those that are watching, it's really, I mean, the meditation one is great. I mean, I watched that one. They're all really good, but that one, especially in an era where everything is vying for our attention. And I can tell you that, I mean, a good example is I've talked to my mother about this. She's like, she has a lot of anxiety and stuff. She goes, I go, you got to meditate. Like meditation will help. Oh, I can't meditate because I can't quiet my mind for that long. And I'm like, it's not a box to check off. It's not like that. You're missing the point. And again, I think it goes back to the idea of productivity where it's like, it's a box to check off. It's something we can accomplish or achieve. So again, what have you solved? And like,
well, the inside joke on the podcast is that nothing gets solved because it's impossible to solve any of these things. But you like the inspiration behind that show was in my industry, everybody's doing the same sort of podcast. They're all interviewing the same guests. There's like this constant conveyor belt of guests coming through. Everybody's talking to the same people. You'll watch one of these shows and three guests will come in the same week and they will say three completely contradictory things. And meanwhile, the host is like just sitting there grinning, nodding along with them. And so I sense that there was just like a lot of frustration in my market of like people being like, I don't know who to believe. Everybody's kind of saying the same thing, but they're all contradicting each other. And so the goal was solved was like, you know what, like I took my longtime research assistant. He and I kind of got together and we were like, let's just do like the most comprehensive deep dive into each topic that we possibly can. We will be as thorough as we can possibly be. We will get into the psychology, the history, the philosophy behind all of these concepts. And then we'll give people, like, based on the research, what are the most practical things that they can do to solve this in their life? And then the joke is that if you make it through an entire episode of Solve, which is no small feat, they're like 4-hour episodes, then this issue will be solved in your life forever, or you will be equipped to solve this issue in your life forever. So the show's done amazingly well.
Yeah.
We I think in our first year we had 8 episodes. We had 10 million downloads total. It's been a huge hit, and like a ton of work goes into it. We've since expanded the research team. We have 4 full-time people as researchers and doing pre-production and putting together like briefs and outlines and everything for us. And it's a ton of fun.
When I look back, you haven't been on doing a lot of YouTube for very long on the Mark Manson channel. Like, it's only been 6 years, I think, total. I think COVID, was it a COVID thing?
I think I started it in COVID. I didn't start taking it seriously until maybe like 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah. But I love, it's like watching Gary Vee videos, but from way further back where you watch the evolution of things. It's always cool to see that stuff. You mentioned evolution earlier. a friend of mine, Steve Cam's got a new book coming out called How to Try Again. You blurbed it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
What is the correlation between effort and the idea of, removing or adding or dealing with the fucks that you're trying to either give or not give?
Can you clarify that? Like, what exactly do you mean by
Sure.
that?
So what I mean is, like, if the subtlety that's in the
Mhm.
subtle art of not giving fuck, the key word there to me isn't the F-bomb, it's subtle, right?
Yeah.
It's like, how do you,
Yeah.
so trying effort plays a role in that, right?
Yes.
So I'm wondering what level, like, where does effort fit in to that part of
Mm,
the equation?
I see. Well, effort is interesting because people just assume that effort is like always a good thing, and you should always be trying as hard as you possibly can. And um, but it's interesting. Like effort only is a good thing if you are actually aligned with pursuing something that's good for you, or
Mm.
pursuing something that is matters for you. Or we talked about productivity earlier, right? It's like you can spend 12 hours working on something that doesn't matter at all, doesn't move the needle on anything.
Yeah.
So effort is it's a double-edged sword, and it can cut both ways. And if you're not properly aligned around the things that you actually care about, or the things that are important, effort works against you, and it can become a dangerous thing. So and I guess this is another way that I'm kind of counter-positioned against a lot of people in the self-help space, because self-help is so much about like, rah rah, you can do it, just go for your dreams, just go for it. And I feel like nobody ever stops to ask people like, wait, why is that your dream?
Yeah. Well,
Like,
but that's the point. Like, but that's the point again. Bringing up the Thoreau documentary again, which it's he was asking people, wait a minute, hold on, just stop for a second. Like, what if you
yes,
stopped? And there's not enough of that. There's not enough of,
yes.
because we're constantly. It is interesting. I was talking to some members of my community. Christina is a member of my time crafting trust community, and I was booking my train ticket. I'm going from Toronto to Montreal. My daughter goes to university in
Mhm.
Montreal, and I'm going to be in Toronto for something. And I'm wondering, like, why are the premium prices for the seats facing from where I'm coming from, not to where I'm going? It didn't dawn on me. And Christina's from the UK, and she said, well, it's because you get a better view if you're looking backwards, because you're seeing it. You have more time to look at what you left behind. And if you're facing forward, it's blazing by. I'm like, that's an interesting thing to think
Huh.
about. That's why you're paying a bit, because it's a slower pace. You get to, like, it's a better, quote, view. And that's by virtue of being slowed down to a degree. But we don't spend the time to stop. And so how do you, in like, I'm imagining in the work that you're doing now, and I mean, Solved is a good example of that. 4 hours to sit and stop for a second. Let's look at
Yeah.
this. How do you, what are one of the things, let's just leave it at one, because again, we could go on forever on this, to convince people, persuade them even to go, hey, if you stop or pause for a moment, things aren't going to pass you by. If anything, you're going to move in the right direction.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it's one of those things that once people experience it, then you start to realize. Like I've experienced this, as I'm a bit of a workaholic, and I generally resist taking time off. But every time I do take time off, by the end of it, I'm like, oh my god, this is the best thing I have done. I have so many new ideas. I have so much new perspective. Like I understand I was like wasting my time doing these three things before. I'm going to stop doing those things. Um, so that's part of it. It's just like experiencing the actual benefits from it. The thing with the effort question, and figuring out if you're actually aligned and if you're actually moving in the right direction. The question that I always posit to people, and this question shows up all throughout my work, is instead of thinking about the benefits of the dream you're chasing or the goal you're pursuing, ask yourself about the cost. Ask yourself if you actually want to have the costs of the dream you're pursuing or the
Right.
goal that you desire. Because people, our psychological tendency is to never consider. We're very bad at holding both costs and benefit in our minds at the same time. We tend to either only think about the upside of something that we want, or only think about the downside of something that we're avoiding, without considering like the flip side of the equation. So it's I've got this line in one of my books where I say like it's your dream home is the house that you have to constantly repair. Your perfect marriage partner is the person that you're going to fight with for the rest of your life. I go on and like give multiple examples of that. Like nobody thinks about, hey, are you willing to accept the downside of this arrangement? Because if you're not, then it's not going to be sustainable.
Got a couple more questions to run by you, and one of them kind of, I imagine as a writer, I'd love to hear if you have any journaling practices. Do you journal? If so, how do you kind of journal? Because I think that's an example of how you can pause to a degree.
Absolutely. Journaling is a great example. I'm what I call an emergency journaler. So I don't I don't have a daily journaling practice, but when shit is hitting the fan, I am journaling like hours a day. I find that journaling really helps me sort and organize my thoughts if I'm like really struggling with a big decision or a major issue in my life, or I've got like some sort of conflict going on or insecurity that I'm dealing with. Um, Journaling is, for me, it's a tool that I use in those moments, but on a day-to-day basis, it's not something that I do regularly.
Are you a night owl, an early riser, somewhere in between?
I used to be a night owl, and then I got old, and now I'm an early riser.
So no, but here's actually interestingly, like, do you are because I mean I'm getting older too, and I'm a night owl. I just can't stay up as late, but my mornings are still garbage because I'm still wired to be a night owl. Like, did you actually make a physical change to make those mornings work better for you, or are you still like I'm not really good to go until 9 or 10, regardless?
I did nothing. I don't know what happened, Mike. I,
Okay.
like, literally turned 40, and I started waking up at 6 a.m. with no alarm and being happy. I don't know. I was like, "How did I get here? What happened?"
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's interesting because I am noticing I'm getting up a little bit earlier, but I'm still useless before that. I need to consume content early in the day so I can actually do something with it later in the day, as opposed to
Yeah,
others who create and then consume. Speaking
yeah.
of content, I'm always curious when I'm looking at a body of work, right? And we talked about your second book, we've talked about your YouTube channel, but what's something that, and you don't have to reveal anything that's out of school or anything, but that you're kind of excited about your phase two in your stages of life. You talk about the exploration phase, which I think it intersperses itself throughout the other phases regardless. But what is something
Mhm.
that you're exploring right now that might surprise somebody or maybe even just surprised you?
Um, so I'm actually talking to you right now from, uh, the office space of, an AI startup that I co-founded last year.
Hmm.
So that's a perfect example. I never imagined that I would become a tech founder. Um, but about 2 years ago, when ChatGPT blew up, I started noticing that a lot of people in my personal life were using ChatGPT as like a coach or a therapist. And I got really curious about it, and I started messing around with it myself, and I was like, "Okay, there's a lot of potential here, but, like, this is clearly not designed for this use case." Um, and I started thinking about it, and it kinda, like, sunk its claws into me because as we were talking about earlier, so much of my industry, so much of just personal growth, life advice is about the language you put around it, right? It's not the ideas. People know the ideas, and they've heard the ideas before, but it's the personalization, it's the personality, it is the encapsulation, it's the context that it's given. And I realized I'm like, there's a huge opportunity here
Mm.
to uh, create something really incredible for millions and millions of people. And especially when you look at the statistics around, um, mental health access and coaching access and counselors and therapists and everything, like there's for every mental health professional, mm, there's some statistics show that there's over 1,000 people who want access to somebody, but like either can't afford it or they don't live near one. And so I kind of got bit by the bug, and I'm like, I think AI is going to like completely disrupt my industry. I think it's like all these kind of classic books and courses and seminars and webinars and things, like so much of this stuff is just going to end up being handled by really well trained AIs. And so I met my co-founder last year and ended up in a AI startup, and it's called Purpose. People can check it out. It's at purpose.app. And it's been fascinating actually. Like I've never built software before, but um, it's been incredibly rewarding in terms of like just really thinking through, kind of taking like all this philosophical, psychological stuff I've been studying my entire career, and then like trying to apply that into a practical product that actually helps people as quickly as possible.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Mark, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. Where can people keep up with, you've already shared Purpose, but where can people keep up with what you've got going on elsewhere? YouTube, of course, if people are watching this live on YouTube, you should just check out the YouTube channel, but where else?
Markmanson.net. I've got a free newsletter, goes out twice a week, and check out the Solve podcast. And yeah, I'm everywhere.